Hi, I'm Audrey, and today I'm going to show you how I make my famous Milky Way cake, which by definition from the original recipe is called Almost ELAINE'S Milky Way Cake. And the way I do it is almost ELAINE'S Milky Way Cake. So the beginning is to start preparing your pan. So I take a piece of parchment paper, and we'll use a tube pan. This tube pan is the separating tube pan, but either a regular tube pan or the separating tube pan will work. I'm going to just place the insert of the pan, or if you're using a non-separating, the whole pan, and just trace the circle, the bottom of the pan. So I've already done this. Then you'll cut out the circle, fold the circle in quarters. Give a little judge to the size of your ring, and voila, you'll have something that'll fit on. Put the pencil side of the paper down, and now I'm going to grease the pan before I put that parchment paper in. You can also use wax paper. So it should be lightly greased. This is just a nub of butter. Probably a little too much here. I'll use the wrappers from the other butter I prepared to just grease the inside of the pan. And we'll put that aside. I'll put my pan back together and do the original parchment paper I prepared and just place it inside the pan. Flatten that a little. And then I'll turn the oven on to 300 degrees. So it's a pretty slow oven for this cake. And next I will start melting the Milky Way bars. So here's where the big math comes into this project. When the recipe was originally written, Milky Way bars were 2.16 ounces. Now they're 1.84 ounces. So it originally called for 6 2.15 ounce Milky Way bars. With the 1.84 ounce Milky Way bars, we'll need 7 Milky Way bars and a tiny little extra pinch. So this contains 7 Milky Way bars and 1 stick of butter. And I'm going to warm that on a very low heat. So I'd already started this and starting to melt. I'll chop the Milky Ways a little to get them to melt. So on my electric oven, I now have this on a 2 level of heat. I could probably crank it up a little bit, but I wouldn't take it too much over that. We have the oven on 300 degrees. We have the Milky Ways starting to melt, and we'll start creaming 1 stick of butter, which I already have in my mixing bowl. Now put my beater in, and I'll start blending up. So this butter was softened. I had left it out for quite a while. Always best to start with butter that's softened. Adding in 2 cups granulated sugar. So that mixture will not get really creamy because it's a lot of sugar and not a ton of butter. I'll check on our Milky Ways melting. Coming to a good consistency. I'm going to lower it a bit. And I'll add 2 teaspoons of vanilla into this butter and sugar mixture. And once again, I'll check on the Milky Ways and butter. So if you can see the consistency in here, it It's getting fairly smooth, and I'm stirring it so it blends into a nice smooth mixture. And I'm going to let that go aside for a minute and prepare my dry ingredients. So I have 2.5 cups all-purpose flour in this bowl. To that, I'll add a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. And this is a 1/2 teaspoon baking soda. So we literally got a teeny weeny pinch. And here is where I have changed the recipe very slightly. The recipe calls for a cup of buttermilk. I'm going to use this powdered buttermilk. It's just easier to have on hand, easier to find. So 4 tablespoons of this powdered buttermilk are going to go in with the dry ingredients. And then instead of adding buttermilk at the end of the recipe, I'll add a cup of water to this. I'll just give that a nice stir. And then once again, I'll check in on the Milky Way bars melting on the stove. So these are heating up nicely. I think I'll just... I turned the heat off on the electric stove because it generates enough heat to finish this. Just as long as you're working with a low temperature on your stove, you should be all right. I already turned off the burner, and we'll get ready for the next step, which is going to be adding the eggs into this butter mixture. So these are also at room temperature. I left them out a while before I started this process, so I'll turn the mixer back on. And now I'm just going to scrape the sides down so I can get things blended a little better. It calls for a scant half of the dry mixture. That's your flour, baking soda, and I have in the buttermilk powder. So I'll put that on a low speed and just eyeball about a little bit less than half. And the confession, I haven't done this with this new mixer, so we'll see how this flies. The idea is to dump all of this chocolate goodness into that batter so it incorporates rather quickly. If it doesn't incorporate quickly and you get little pieces of Milky Way in your cake, it is not the worst thing in the world. So we'll take a little higher and just try to plop it right into the beater. And I'll just leave this pan dirty because we'll melt more Milky Ways for the icing. I'm just going to incorporate the rest of the dry ingredients. And since the buttermilk is already powdered buttermilk in with the dry ingredients, I'm going to add just a cup of water. Next is to just put this into the prepared pan and into a heated oven. So if you have a regular tube pan, it might not be so high. Set the timer. So while that bakes, you can just prepare the ingredients for the icing, but you'll have to do the icing once the cake comes out of the oven. So now you have time to clean up the kitchen, and we'll see you when it's icing time. Our Milky Way cake has baked. It's sitting in the pan. It has been out of the oven for 10 minutes, still pretty warm, and we're preparing the icing for this cake. So I'm using regular old Milky Way bars. But you can use the dark chocolate Milky Way bars for the icing, for the cake, or you can mix them up whichever way you'd like. And I just want to show you these cardboard little cake bottoms, which are nice to have. I'm able to get them at a paper goods store near my house. And before I turn the cake out, I do want to show you the confectioner's sugar. I'm going to put it through a strainer, or if you have a sifter, which I do have, but this just seems quick and easy, just to kind of strain any little lumps and bumps out of your confectioner's sugar, because it does seem to ruin the texture of the icing if you have little clumps of sugar there. I'm going to get a spoon and the rest of these little lumps out. So that was 1 cup of confectioner's sugar, also called Tennant sugar. The important thing about this cake is the cake and the icing need to be warm when you ice this cake. So I have in this pot 6 Milky Way bars and 1 stick of butter that are melting down. I started this right around when I took the cake out of the oven. And again, so it's just like we did for the cake, except it's only 6 of those Milky Way bars. So at a very low temperature. Am I making this look easy? This one got a little stuck. Oh, there it goes. Oh, the cake fell right out without the pan bottom, which is fine. So the original parchment paper is still attached to the cake, so peel that off. There it is. And we'll start to whip up the icing. So the icing's really simple. It's only 4 ingredients. It's the butter, the Milky Ways, and those 2 ingredients are in this pot, and the confectioner's sugar, 1 cup of confectioner's sugar, and vanilla. That's it. So this should make plenty of icing to coat the cake well. I find so many recipes don't make enough icing to really coat the cake, and you really struggle with it. So I have modified this from the originally published recipe. So this recipe was published early 1980s in the Philadelphia Inquirer. Nice and smooth. Just pour this in my mixing bowl. I think I'll throw the confectioner's sugar in. There's 1 tablespoon of vanilla. Like I say, it practically enrobes the cake. Just a nice big. And that's it. That is the Milky Way cake. If I do freeze it, I'll probably freeze it for a half hour with nothing on it, and then put saran wrap over it and leave it there for as long as you need to. Have a great day. I screwed up with 2 cups of sugar and I put in 2.5. I totally screwed up. This is not good. You have to stop the video.
Yeah, do it! Stop it, babe! Hey, just stop it!
It's not going to be terrible. It's just a happy